always a pleasure on my part to bring in the outstanding Mike Poorman, statecollege.com. Mike, welcome back. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Professor Jones. I was just doing some math about Steve Jones, the professor. See if I'm right. You're always good about this. This is year 22 for you teaching, and you're going to hit about 1,000 students in that time, right?
That's probably right. I have 21 this time through, and there was a period of time where I had like 2 or 3 springs in a row where I was teaching 2 classes. So yeah, that's probably right. Yeah.
Wow. So you're over 1,000. Wow. Yeah. Congratulations. That's quite a streak. It's not quite Cal Ripken, but when it comes to teaching broadcasting, sports broadcasting at Penn State, you're an all-time great, Steve.
Well, first of all, I'm the only one that's done it. So I'm also, I could be categorized as the
class by yourself.
I could be categorized as the worst person I've had doing it too. So
I appreciate that self-effacing humor. Nice.
Bye week is at a different time, but that's just the way the schedule fell this time through. What are you looking for out of this team following a bye week? And I know what the competition is Saturday.
I'm looking for a crispness and a ferocity that Jalen Reed showed in the first quarter against West Virginia. If they can find that within themselves, and I think that first quarter by Jalen, I'd be interested to see what you think if there's been someone that's come out with their hair on fire like that. I mean, that may be asking too much, but that's, if that happens, then that comes within, and that comes from within the leadership of the players, not the coaches.
Which, look, they had put together this lion position that is, in a sense, a hybrid. You can play him near the line of scrimmage, you can play him back, and so forth. Is he the type of player that really fits what Tom Allen's been looking for in that kind of guy?
Well, that is a great question. I'm going to put a question back to you that I'm not sure I know the answer. How much do you think that, no one has mentioned this, are there any similarities to the old hero position?
The old hero position was a strong safety. And that's just what it was called back in the day. It was not a third safety out there. But
I thought that guy actually, whether it was a Zordich or some of them had linebacker, bigger kind of guy quality.
If they were, it was because they were the 4th linebacker out there and not the 3rd. And that's the difference between them. That person would be a bigger size, like Reed is a little bit bigger, but you'd be lining up because they always lined up with 3 linebackers. Tom, of course, has been lining up with 2, and Marcelo Ball was primarily that hybrid guy most years at Indiana, where he was part safety, part DB, part safety, part linebacker, because they were lining up with 2 linebackers a lot. This is a case where Penn State's been lining up with 2 linebackers. He essentially becomes the 3rd, as opposed to back in the day with the hero position. The hero position was strong safety, but then would come up and be the 4th linebacker in a 4-4 look.
Well, great explanation, but I guess from the X's and O's, it's that. But Reed's not super. He's not super big. He's really solid.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah.
But I will say this: he certainly has the right mentality.
Yeah.
How's that for an answer?
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. They have played 6 quarters of excellent defense out of 8. Because the second half against Bowling Green, until the final drive, they'd only given up 48 yards in the second half.
And like 6, it was like 6 in the third quarter.
Yeah.
I think that was right. Wasn't it 6 in the third? I think that was a defining number because they came out and they go, listen, let's do this right, and 6 yards is really nothing.
Right. And that's essentially what they did in the first half. Quick game got to him. There's no question about that. And once because Bazelak was 13 of his first 15, he then was only 12 of his next 24. And
you may have mentioned this on your broadcast.
Yeah.
But he's at least going to camp in the NFL, and that was his 42nd start as a big time college quarterback. I mean, that guy was good. He was serious. He was a quality, experienced quarterback.
He had started at Missouri. He started at Indiana. So he had started in the Power Four. And we had pointed this out before the game that, he does this. In other words, and we pointed out the tight end before the game that we thought he was a big-time player. So it's not as if before the game we didn't point out that Bowling Green had the capability of doing this offensively, because they do. It's going to be interesting to see how they finish out in all this. This will be the last regular season non-conference game. Is this the kind of game that has the potential to set a tone to go into the Big Ten, or is there another way to look at it?
No, I mean, as much as maybe that's a good question, and that's would be kind of the hope. But Penn State's going to get into the game, and they know better than anybody. One, maybe two series in, the quality of the competition,
sure, right.
And they'll figure that out quickly. I think the practice on Sunday is going to be as important as a game on Saturday. How quickly they can turn on the dime. How serious are they? How are they really into it for the first time in several weeks in a real game week? The mentality of the players. I think that as I'm thinking about, okay, what am I going to write? What am I going to write on Sunday after the game? It won't be about the Saturday game. It'll be about it's game week. This is a real team, and they have a real football coach, so they have to take it seriously. I'm not that even maybe with Kent State you can look ahead, but I think how they begin next week is even more important, because they're going to perform okay on Saturday.
Yeah, because I am going to take a long, hard look at the Illinois-Nebraska game on Friday night. I mean, that to me is on the checklist of what they have to do. I want to ask about college football officiating. Maybe officiating overall. Josh Pate of CBS Sports wrote an article about this. And I'll give you at least what my opinion is, and then I want to get yours. My opinion is quite simply this. The key to officiating is, does somebody gain advantage on the play by doing something? So look, if there's a holding penalty on an offensive lineman, it gives the quarterback more time. Okay, advantage. But if I'm over here and if I'm throwing to the left, and I'm obviously throwing to the left, and a tug happens over on the right, why am I throwing that flag? Why? It has nothing to do with the play. Nobody gained an advantage. Zero. Now, if the ball goes in that direction, I'll throw the flag because now it's in my direction. But, see, there are a lot of things I don't get because people don't pay to watch people officiate games.
Well, I think you're right. This is where I thought you might go with that, but this may go hand in hand. The dollars involved these days and the stakes are so high that, and I don't know the percentage of officials at college football that's all they do. But in the NFL, that's all they do. And so one call could decide whether you make the playoffs, which has hundreds, millions of dollars of repercussions. And as college football is really a professional league, it has to be professional from beginning to end. And I guess I'm maybe taking you a place you weren't intending. But I read a piece the other day about the folks in the staff, the general managers, that are now the general managers, the people that are now the internal NIL people. It's those people. They are being paid at a rate that is getting close to, some of them, it's between $500,000 and $1 million.
Yeah.
So as the sport becomes more professionalized, yes, the officials, the sideline officials, the replay people, all of those have to be at a caliber that they've never been before.
Yeah, my biggest problem is really has rarely, if ever, been the guys on the field or the women on the field. It really hasn't. My problem in recent years is a problem I didn't think was going to happen. My problem's been with the replay guys. They've made so many baffling decisions. The West Virginia game, Jack and I kept looking at each other like, what, they called what? You confirm that?
I mean, like, even at the beginning with the West Virginia clapping signals, could you see that on the?
You know what?
Replay, right?
We only knew about that because Brian Tripp mentioned it to us on the sideline with something that we didn't see up in the booth. So Brian mentioned that on the sideline because he's down there. Because I don't do the game on TV. And when Brian mentioned it, we're like, no wonder Drew's upset. And so, I mean, things like that. Now, first of all, it's the West Virginia defense that's out there, which means the crowd is louder, which means the ability of an official to hear that is more difficult. How about that?
No, that is good. As a quick aside, of all the things I've seen from Drew, and I'm probably like everybody else, right? His reaction to that, and then his stiff arm later, like, those are the things that you really love to see from your quarterback who's now a veteran. Those type of intangibles, because both times it gets the sideline fired up and the whole team's into it. Like, this is our guy, right?
Well, he's a little bit lighter, and because he's been in the weight room an extra year, he's stronger. So he's a little bit quicker. Point A to point B. And because of the weight room, he can throw a stiff arm. He's stronger, and that's where he is right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I saw a lot of people gave Chuck Losey a lot, and he should. A lot of people gave Chuck Losey credit for that stiff arm.
Yeah. When you look at his level of play, it's 2 games. But when you've looked at his level of play, have you seen something different from Drew Allen?
Yeah, no, yes, his willingness, hey, I don't know how to put it, but the answer is yes, and it's in all that he does, and that's what you want. You know, that position. There's so many other things that go into it. So I think those things are happening, and I think that's that bodes well. Like, I did a preseason list of the most important people on the football team, and Drew's one, and Andy was 2. Mm-hmm. I think how Drew goes, the team will go this year. That's pretty simplistic, but I do believe that.
I do have to ask you about what they're going to eventually do with Beaver Stadium. I mean, Mike, you've been there for decades. I mean, the difference is you don't look at it, but you've been there for decades. You've seen what the place has always looked like and what they've done with it or what they haven't done with it. How interested are you in how this final product is going to be and what it's going to mean for the fans?
Well, that's a good question. I have to tell you what really I think has been, for me, because I wear a lot of hats at Penn State, I like the West. The West Tower Pat's done a great job of getting some significant money from some significant people to build that out, to turn that into a welcome center, so that it's not a 7 days a year thing. Yeah. That it is a welcome center. It's where, when students and their families, potential students and their families come in, Shields or the Hub is a rallying point. Now it'll be when this is all done, it'll be this stadium, and it's the old saying: is that your athletic department, your football team is the front porch to the university?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, literally, that welcome center is going to have a front porch. And I think that's a great marketing tool for Penn State. It's really smart, and I'll be honest, I like that all the money is not just going for one sports team. It's going to benefit all the university, and Misitano and Lubert are very smart and very generous to make that happen, and they're going to get a lot more bang for their buck, and so is Penn State, by making that your portal to coming to the university as a prospective student.
That's a great point, and the 2 anonymous gifts as well. We just don't know the names attached to it. Mike.
Well, Steve, that was so great of you to put forth that gift. I'm going to out you on the air that I know that one of those 210 million was from you, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't like to brag. All right, so yeah, right. Okay, Mike, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time you gave us today.
You're welcome, and I'm sincere. I know the impact. I mean, we know the same kids. 1,000 kids, 22 years. That's a big deal. Congratulations, Steve.
Well, Mike, thank you. That's very kind of you. Hey, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care, bud. Bye-bye.
You know, it's great to be here, and that's just not a stat that you see very often, but it seems like this might be the thing for this season. You know, two weeks in, teams aren't throwing successfully all that much, and scoring's dropping, and we're waiting to see what the league's response is going to be.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see what the league's response happens to be. Before I get to the Steelers, we had an entire off season where offensive coordinators have been dissecting defenses from the previous year. And we all know what the influence Cover 2 has had on taking away big plays and creating 8, 10, 12-play drives. Are you surprised that offenses and coordinators have not adapted better? Because we're seeing it's actually getting worse, not better.
You know what the root of that answer is? It's always been kind of a chicken versus the egg thing. Is it the coordinator? Is it the players? Yeah. To some degree, I think everybody would agree that it's both. But I think what we're seeing, just based around looks around the league, and a lot of this is kind of rooted too in anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of hyperbole involved with it. I think quarterback play itself at the bottom level is way lower than it usually is.
I agree.
And the top is not holding out the way that it has in the past to kind of bolster the numbers a bit. We haven't had a quarterback with a tremendous game yet, but we've had a lot of really bad ones. Mm-hmm. 8 quarters of watching Bo Nix. I can't imagine anybody outside of maybe Bo Nix's family thinks that he should be in the position that he's in. Bryce Young, it was almost merciful that they announced that they're not going to play him next week. Right. There are a lot of teams that are struggling to figure everything out. And my opinion is quarterbacks haven't been able to bail out coordinators who otherwise haven't done all that good of a job.
Right.
I think if we look at this compared to what I think history is going to call kind of the golden age of quarterbacks, your Brady versus Manning with Breeze, Rodgers, Roethlisberger kind of in the background. The main players aren't producing as well as the predecessors. You know, the real top quarterbacks in the past have done, and because of that, you're really starting to see a lower end that's being exposed for struggling quite a bit. And that brings us back to exactly how you started this segment. Justin Fields is commanding legitimately one of the most mediocre offenses, production-wise, that we've seen in the NFL. And they've had both of the games they've played in fairly well under control offensively. And they haven't played well. They've only scored 1 touchdown. The MVP of the league might be a kicker right now. I mean, that's just the way it is. You had 2 kickers in week 1 that hit 6 field goals, and then 1 in week 2 that hit 7. You know, this is not offensive football the way that we're used to seeing it. I really think the biggest thing is the play of the mid-level to lower-level quarterbacks is way below what it has been in the past.
There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, because you can only go by what talent is produced for you to take. But we've seen a couple things. I know eventually I'm going to get to the Steelers. I promise. But Jordan Love waited. Aaron Rodgers waited. Drake May is waiting. I know there's impatience by ownership, coaches, and especially by fans about, well, you drafted this guy, you better play him. But is there something to be said? I mean, it's an individual basis, I get it, but is there something to be said for waiting?
I've always thought you're drafting a player and not drafting a position. And what I mean by that is just because he was the first overall pick, third overall pick, whatever, does not mean he has to play.
Right.
You're drafting a player, hopefully, because everyone will say this, it doesn't pertain to quarterbacks, just offensive linemen. You draft this guy, you've got that position set for the next 15 years, which is insanely not valid statistically. Injuries obviously play a huge factor in the longevity of the career of a player, but everybody thinks you get these quote-unquote non-essential positions, and you draft a player, a highly regarded first-round player, put him into that spot, he's going to be there forever. The quarterback, though, is not only going to be there forever, but the entire length of his career is not looked at all for the quarterback. It's immediately. Yet that's the position that's the hardest to learn, the hardest to pick up immediately, and requires the most work by an entire coaching staff to get ready to play each week. So Caleb Williams, it's kind of funny. He's not getting nearly the amount of criticism that other first overall picks who have struggled in 2 games is getting. He's not playing particularly well. They're asking him to do a lot of stuff that he hasn't done to this point, and he's not living up to that. I'm not criticizing him in a way that requires punishment. It's just he's not playing well. Their team overall is not playing well, but he is not playing well. Nobody is going to say, though, and nobody has said, sit Caleb Williams. He's got to play right away. We got to learn these things as we go. We've got to figure all this out. Well, then what about the guys that do wait? Why is that different? Jordan Love waited because he was, the 27th overall pick?
Yep.
I have a theory that they didn't even want to draft Love. Love wasn't even their guy, but San Francisco traded up and took Brandon Ayuk one spot before the Packers were picking, and Love was next on their board.
Yep.
That's why they didn't even talk to Rodgers about it.
Right.
I don't think they were prepared for that. They obviously had a high-level quarterback who took that as it turns out, a deeply personal insult, and won 2 more MVPs before he left. So you can understand where Green Bay's thinking is as far as not playing him, but that's not Love's fault. At the same time, we saw Love play during the Rodgers era, and he didn't play nearly as well as he's playing right now. So the main thing I would say is how good and how consistent is your coaching staff going to be? If you have a structure in place where you can still compete and you don't need this guy to learn as he goes, per se, I think you should sit him just for the sake of letting him develop. Because the reason I say that is look at Bryce Young. Bryce Young had to play, and Bryce Young is playing right now for a dumpster fire of an organization.
No doubt.
A variety of problems with that organization. They have ripped up and paved back over their entire functioning structure 3 or 4 times in the last 3 years.
Right.
Young has been a part of 2 of these now, and he looks completely lost. Nobody that knows anything about the position thinks that Bryce Young is as poor as he is playing
That's
right now.
right. I agree
He has
with
no
that.
confidence in himself. The offense that they're putting out for him is completely different than it was before, and all these things were patched together on the fly.
Yep.
You can't build a team like that. So Young obviously is the one that's going to suffer, but at the same time, I would argue because of the scrutiny that their owner has brought upon himself and upon his team, because of the front office moves that they've made that largely haven't worked out, I think you have to sit Bryce Young because the veteran, Andy Dalton, who this might be the last stretch of games he has in the NFL,
right.
He should be the one to handle all of that on the field, lead the team in a calm, composed manner, and probably lose every start that he makes because the team just isn't very good. Mm-hmm. He should be taking the bullets right now for Bryce Young, while Young, they can sit and work with Young to figure everything out. In other words, he might not be playing, but Young's the starter. You know that. It's okay to admit it, in my opinion. I think Dave Canellis, who also might not survive another season as a head coach, I think he's absolutely making the right move in this case. And it's because they didn't sit him when they had a functional disaster all around them. You can't throw a 22-year-old quarterback in the first overall pick and expect him to fix everything because you aren't able to handle any other component of your franchise. And that's the problem. But there are plenty of examples of a quarterback that can come in and shoulder that load. I don't think necessarily Bryce Young was that guy, but you're talking about an exceptional level quarterback. Even to the point, I might argue, Trevor Lawrence wasn't put in a much better position than Young was.
I agree.
As weird as this sounds, though, I think Joe Burrow might have been. I think Joe Burrow is also exceptional in a lot of ways, and they did have the right structure around him. I didn't think that they did, but they proved that they could put it together, and they're reaping the benefits of him playing right away, though he did get hurt and didn't play the entire season. So there's something to be said about the younger player being shielded from the issues that caused them to be selecting first overall in the first place. And Carolina has paid multiple times now, and Bryce Young is having to carry that burden for them, and it's too big. I'd argue it's too big for any quarterback. I don't know what quarterback is going to make that team successful right now.
Right, because after Joe Burrow was drafted, 1 year later they drafted with the 5th overall pick Jamar Chase. They could have had Penny Sewell, but they drafted Chase. 1 year after Bryce Young was drafted, oh, wait a minute, Chicago selected Caleb Williams with their pick. See, they didn't have a pick in the first round.
Pick next year either.
Right, exactly. I mean, they mortgaged so much to do this. They're not giving him a chance to get people around him. The Steeler defense, you cannot win these games unless you are minimizing what the other team can do. Thus, field goals do make a difference in winning the games. What are you seeing from the Steeler defense in 2 games against 2 mediocre offenses, albeit, but still, the Steeler defense has been the best unit on the field in both games. Why?
I would, first and foremost, only feel right to point out that you're looking at Denver was horrible offensively in that game. A large part of that is a rookie quarterback who I don't know if he's big enough for the chair that he's in.
Can I tell you a quick story? I was around a group on Sunday, and when the Steelers scored to make it 7-0, I looked at the group and I said, I'm not joking here. They now have enough points.
Yep. It was a question of how many field goals Denver was going to have to hit to win the game. Nick's, I mean, to be fair, is tight end, the guy that flat out couldn't catch the ball if you paid him to, like they were. He wasn't helping anything, and that draws some attention away. But oh boy, he doesn't belong out there through 2 games. I mean, we talked about this too. There was something about the way Sean Payton was really selling Bo Nix. I mean, coaches don't go out of their way to compliment a rookie quarterback that much. It was obvious to me that they were pumping him up. They needed to sell him to the fan base. He's lost. I mean, that's a problem. I don't know how much more he's going to be able to start. From a PR perspective, though, Payton might not be able to move off of him. But as far as Pittsburgh's defense went, I mean, from an individual assignment perspective, what I would say to do is look at Pittsburgh's defense operate and then look at their offense. I think most people would probably agree that Pittsburgh's defense is a little further along than the offense is, right? That's not a bold statement. Their defense is executing. They are operating with a sense of efficiency and a sense of brutality. They're beating their opponent, and they're doing it collectively. Because I felt, to Denver's credit, they did a great job isolating T.J. Watt. Watt was largely quiet in that game. We have not seen that much. I don't think they threw a whole lot of different things at Watt that they otherwise might not have. You know, conspiracy people might point out high altitude. He missed maybe a few more plays than he would in a game. But he was, I mean, he's a factor, obviously, but he didn't make the splash plays that you expect him to. We saw another pretty solid game from Deontay Jackson, which I don't think was expected. And I think Joey Porter Jr. also played a really good game. They're getting plays from their safeties, the ones not named Minka Fitzpatrick, which is different for Pittsburgh. We haven't seen that in a while. And I think they're getting outstanding play from their linebacking group. So they're operating like veterans. I think that unit, we will see very strong play consistently because it's not fluke effort. That doesn't mean Justin Herbert doesn't change Denver's offense if he's in there. They've got Herbert at maybe a little less than 100% this week, but you're going to see a much better fundamental offensive team. That's going to be pure smash-mouth football. Can the Steelers hold up to that? That's the one issue with their defense that I might get into a little bit. Giving up some chunk plays on the ground. I think a team that's really going to want to isolate the run, focus on that primarily, and play a low-scoring game back at them the way the Steelers want to play it. I think basically the Chargers will give them a real good contest. And I think Justin Herbert, along with that, is vastly superior than the performances we saw from the last two quarterbacks. They can make a little bit more things happen. This is a much better opponent for them to play to find out how realistic they are defensively. Two games against two probably inferior teams. We'll see, but I really like the direction it's going.
J.K. Dobbins is a terrific running back. He performs well in Harbaugh's system. Herbert's already got 3 touchdowns. And by the way, the 3 rookie starting quarterbacks in the first 2 weeks of the season have combined for exactly 0 touchdown passes. So far, so good. Offensively, here's the big question. Can they generate enough to win?
They have found 2 ways to do that. Asking them to do it a third time, in my mind, is pretty tough. Steelers used to be invincible in their home opener. They haven't been the last couple of years. I don't feel great about this for Pittsburgh's chances, unless this is a week in which the coaching staff is relentless on them offensively as far as their discipline and as far as their operational execution goes. That was the primary concern. I noticed you didn't bring up Broderick Jones and whatever happened to him over that stretch of play.
I did not.
I don't know, but wow, that was something. So you don't see that very much. In like a 5-play sequence, there was one. It wasn't procedure. You had 2 holding penalties and a false start. That's what it was. Yeah. He had a solid rep, called for holding, beaten on a play, and called for holding on maybe the best pass of Justin Fields' career. Yeah. That negated another 40-yard completion from this offense. They don't have many of these shots, and their own players are taking them away from them when they are executing them. I will say this, and I feel I owe this because I've been probably one of the more outspoken critics of George Pickens to this point. Yes. He looks fantastic. Yep. He has done a great job preparing himself to be an all-level, all-route type of receiver. He's got an inside route now. He can run a slant. He can run a short post. He wasn't doing that particularly well before. They've got him doing it. They need to find ways, though, to get half of the defense off of him whenever he moves off the line, because that's what's happening. And they're not going to move until that happens because they're not running particularly well, which, you've got rotating right tackles, one of which appears to be playing against you in the time that he's in there. And the other one is making his first start, along with the second starts of your left guard and your center. You've got some continuity problems on your offensive line quickly into the season. They've got to get right with that. They've got to be able to run the ball a bit and then start working in the play action and the rollout stuff that Fields can excel with. That's where the big plays are going to come from. But that's a long sequence problem. You know, there are only so many practice sessions that they're going to get. They've got to fix all of that, though. But when they do, I think, yeah, you're going to look at, you know, the potential of a few explosive plays in there. Maybe, you know, this is crazy for the Steelers over the last 3 years, a game in which they scored 2 touchdowns. You know, they might be able to do a little something on offense. And this is going to be a really tough defense. You know, I think they might give up yards against the Chargers. Yeah. Like you said, Dobbins is playing real well, and Harbaugh is going to feed him until he, you know, falls apart. Right. I don't mean that comedically because, you know, his injury history and everything. But he's a great player. We've always known that he's a great player. It's going to be a tough test. Offensively, they've really got to get, you know, to a point where they are functional operationally. Cut the penalties out. Be where you're supposed to be, make your blocks, and get up the field. And I know that sounds simple. It's a Pop Warner strategy, but Arthur Smith's offense is there. You can see it. They're doing things that will work. But from an execution standpoint, that has not gone well for them through 2 games.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, but I do have to ask this. I'm watching the Texans-Bears game the other night. There's an interception down the sideline. They called a pass interference in the center of the field about 30 yards away from where the pass was thrown, and you could see the entire time the pass was going to be thrown there. My biggest issue with officials on the field is that if only call stuff that affects the outcome of the play. In other words, there's a holding penalty, it gives the quarterback time, it affects the outcome of the play, right? If you spin a guy around the middle when they're not even looking there and you throw it over here, hold the flag unless they throw in that direction. There are too many penalties being called right now, in my opinion. Neal, your thoughts?
Which I think that's an excellent question. I've said this through 2 games. There are way more penalties, it seems, going against offense than there has been in the past.
Yes.
You know, Steelers fans are quick to point to the offensive pass interference against George Pickens. That was a horrendous call at the NFL level. They don't make that call. I remember what you're talking about as far as the Bears and Texans game goes. You're right. If you look at the rule, look at how they define holding. The play needs to be there for it to be called. If it's away from the ball, they're not calling you for holding. And there's just much more of that than there needs to be, I think, and maybe that's contributing to the lower scoring. I'm not sure.